On our next installment of America's Hope, a very difficult topic to discuss: human trafficking. Watch and learn from people who have been victimized and now they're victorious, and also see how experts are advising American families on what they must do to protect their children from human trafficking and child exploitation. That's next on America's Hope. Welcome back to America's Hope. I'm Kelly Wright. Our next guest is a woman who I'd like to say is a champion of hope. You see, she faced tremendous adversity as a young woman, and at a young age she was sexually assaulted, abused, and exploited through sexual trafficking for 7 years. But her story doesn't end there. Bishop Donna Hubbard joins me now to discuss the power of her faith, her love, and her hope in overcoming the brutal and violent world of human trafficking. And in fact, Bishop, you are now a successful preacher, teacher, mother, grandmother, and survivor of sexual predators and traffickers. I like to say you're more of an overcomer, more than just a victim. You are a victor. And now you're helping
Absolutely.
women throughout the United States who are victimized. And what was it like for you in terms of getting to that place where you were no longer a survivor, but an overcomer and a champion of hope?
First of all, let me thank you for having me here on America's Hope. I'm Kelly. I appreciate you for the invitation and for praying and for the work that you're doing, bringing America hope, telling the stories that often don't get told. So I appreciate that. Thank you again. And people often ask me, how did you survive? How did you live through that? And I have to tell people I survived my life. And I thank God that I survived my life because I don't look like what I've been through. And there was a destiny and a purpose for my life that was greater than my circumstances. And so I'm really grateful today that I was not judged by my circumstances, but by my ability to overcome them. And I couldn't have done it without faith and without the grace of God.
You were a woman trying to get somewhere in your life, and yet people were trying to hold you back and enslave you into degradation through their own depravity. What happened, and how did you break free from it?
You know, the interesting thing is most people think that human trafficking is only sexual exploitation, and it is so much more. And from the media and the entertainment industry has glamorized, to use that word loosely, the whole process of human trafficking. But human trafficking is more than just being kidnapped. It is force, fraud, and coercion. And force, we know, is kidnapping. Fraud is selling the lie. You know, if you get this wonderful job, no experience necessary, all expenses paid, and then you end up in a country where you have no ID, no documents, and you find yourself at the mercy of the people that brought you there. And that's called fraud, selling the lie and buying it. And then there's coercion. Coercion is where they tell you either you do this or we will do that. And that's how I became a victim. I was a young mother looking for love in all the wrong places. I really did believe that this person that I met cared about me, loved me. And instead, I woke up being gang raped. I obviously had been drugged, and when I could not get rid of the memories in my mind, I took my children and I ran. And I ran from a wonderful job. I was a flight attendant at that time, a young woman with children and working a glamorous job as a flight attendant, but I couldn't get away from the memories and the things that had happened to me. And I left with my children and went to the other side of the country, and I found out that everywhere I went, there I was. So my memories stayed with me. I moved into one of the worst areas of Los Angeles and tried to start my life over again. And I moved into an apartment complex that was 2 doors down from a man and his wife and her sister. And they helped me find food and clothes and helped me take care of the kids. And 2 months later, he tells me he's a pimp and now I owe him. And basically, I was told to do what I was told to, or else they would take one of my children.
Oh
And
my
that
goodness.
was the coercion. That was what it took for me um, to obey what they told me. And
Wow.
I would have done anything to protect my children. So I did what I was told to stay alive.
Yeah.
And I was beaten and raped and left for dead 3 times. I was drugged. I was sold for weapons, for drugs, for if they lost a bet, for I was traded for Super Bowl tickets, and I did what I had to stay alive. Um, and that went on for years, even after leaving California and moving to the, to Minnesota and working as an investigative reporter for one of the local television stations, going to school, trying to put my life back together again. And I found myself exposed to a drug addicted community. And unfortunately, somehow I was seen by somebody who knew me from California. And the next thing I knew, the same people in California that had me came to Minnesota to reclaim me. And at that point, I knew that my life was in danger. My children's lives were in danger. And it wasn't until I realized that I was not going to be able, they're never going to let me go. I was going to have to find a way out. I ended up getting my children to a safe place to my mother, and I was arrested and sentenced to 24 years in federal maximum security prison. That was my only way of escaping my traffickers.
Donna, this is an incredible, painful story for you. So you went to prison. What did they, well, first of all, what were they charging you on? And were you able to tell authorities, wait a minute, you're talking to a person who's been victimized and exploited. What about the people who have done this to me?
The interesting thing is one of my campaigns and one of my projects that I advocate for is the decriminalization of victims. So as crazy as it sounds, I'm not the only victim that is criminalized. Quite often, especially when it comes to human trafficking, people who are arrested as predators were at one time victims and were victimized. And so the people that I was arrested with, when I was arrested, we were arrested under drug charges. And I was warned to keep my mouth shut about anything else. And I knew that if I didn't, I knew what they were capable of. So I didn't say anything for almost 3 years. And I remember the counselor, I was sentenced, like I said, to 24 years, 2 12-year sentences in federal prison. And I remember one of the counselors said to me, Donna, you don't act like any of these other women. You're articulate, you're smart. What are you doing here? And it wasn't until I really felt that someone saw me that I was able to sit down and tell her my story. And at that time, nobody was talking about human trafficking, and especially in the African American community. You were either a whore or a prostitute, and there was nothing in the middle. There was no one talking about human trafficking. And I really couldn't articulate it. I knew that what happened to me was much more than prostitution, because it wasn't just selling me. Or as a prostitute. There were so many other things that I had to do to stay alive that I couldn't equate it to simple prostitution, but I didn't know about human trafficking. I didn't know how to articulate that. And so I managed to keep my mouth shut. And when I finally did tell this counselor, those individuals were contacted. They were also in prison. They had been in prison during the same drug arrest that I was imprisoned with, at least some of them, most of them. But they were able to go back to them, validate the charges that were being levied against them, not only by me, but by some other young women who had been identified as victims, and they were found guilty. So because that happened, and because I was able to talk about it at some point, it brought light to what was considered much more than pimping a prostitute. It was considered human trafficking, because human trafficking, again, involves so much more than sexual exploitation. And human trafficking also engages other forms of terrorism and other forms of trafficking, drug trafficking, weapons trafficking, terrorism, money laundering. all of those play into human trafficking. The interesting thing is you can almost guarantee that where you find human trafficking, you're going to find one of those other forms of terrorism or exploitation. And for the most part, many people don't understand, and some people don't acknowledge I'm being trafficked because of the stigma that society has put on being victimized. Often there are many victims that don't say, yes, I'm being trafficked. They would rather take some ownership of what is happening to them than to say that they were victimized. And I didn't know how to take ownership, but I didn't know how to say I wasn't guilty of the whole thing either, because no one was talking about human trafficking.
I'm talking to Bishop Donna Hubbard, I should say. We're coming back in just a moment after the break. And welcome back to America's Hope. You know, sometimes hope is fleeting because we don't often see it or feel it, particularly when we're trapped in something that we don't think we can get out of. But the guest that I've been talking to, Bishop Donna Hubbard, she found a way out, and it's because of her faith and her hope and her love for God and for her children. And also, I would have to say, Donna, perhaps a little angel. Americans believe in angels, and maybe that counselor who heard you in prison and saw you and noted how you acted and behaved said there's something different about you, and that led to the unraveling of your story because you were keeping it in.
Yeah.
And that's what happens to people who've been victimized. They keep it in because they feel it's their fault. They feel they're responsible. I'd like you to break the mold tonight because you're bold and courageous and you love people. I'd like you to let Americans know why women who have been victimized, and even men and children who have been victimized, should no longer see themselves as victims and get out of that past and start yelling for help.
You know, thank you for that. This segue into this conversation. One of the things I want to say is a response to something you said a few minutes ago, and that is the trafficking of people of color did not just begin with a movement called human trafficking. The trafficking of people of color has gone on for centuries as an acceptable practice. And for centuries, they did not look at the trafficking of women of color and girls of color as something illegal. It was an acceptable practice around the world. And so when it came to talking about slavery and modern day slavery and human trafficking, it wasn't until there were women and girls who don't look like me that were trafficked, that started being bought and sold, that it became a movement. So I think I need to say that out front. That,
clearly
that
you
we
do,
have
because
been trafficked.
and not to interrupt you
for many years.
Exactly, and not to interrupt you, but it's women of color, it's African Americans, it's Black women, it's Asian women, it's Latino women, women of color. But like you said,
Absolutely.
Once it became known and more noted in other communities, predominantly white communities, then people began to pay attention to, we've got a problem here and we need to do something about it. So
Right.
now you created Woman at the Well, a transition center to
Yes.
help women of all colors and backgrounds
Yes.
see what it is and deal with it in order to overcome it. How is that going, and how many thousands of women have you helped as a result of that?
You know, Kelly, it's interesting that I started doing the work before I was even released from prison. Women would come to me because I was articulate. I was writing appeals. All my appeals, by the way, got turned down. But I remained faithful to God, and He remained faithful to me, because I knew that there was a purpose for my pain. There was a purpose for this process, you know. And so I started doing this work long before I was released, with engaging other women who had stories and testimonies very much like mine. And when I got ready to be released, I knew that I had to make a difference. I knew I had to do something to help women like myself who got out with nothing. And so I literally hit the ground running, as they say. And I got out believing that I could make a difference. I just started talking to other women who I got out that I literally met at the probation office and say, hey, you know, let's get together and talk about where you can find a job, where you can get clothes, who's hiring, who counselors that can help. what can we do to help each other and support one another? And that support group went from being 5 women to about 18 women. And by that time, I started bringing in women who came from Spelman College, Morehouse College, women who were entrepreneurs, women who were pastors. And I brought professional women in to talk to women like us, because I truly believe that if we could surround ourselves with people who were already doing the work that we wanted to do and already were where we wanted to be, that would begin to rub off on us. We would be able to be encouraged, and that we would have the hope that our lives could be better. And so I created Woman at the Well Transition Center after some of the women started going back to prison. And I realized that we needed more than a support group. We needed something more structured. And that's where Woman at the Well Transition Center came from. And it came from John chapter 4, when it talks about the woman at the well who met Jesus. And he didn't tell her about all the people that had abused her or exploited her or done her wrong. He told her about herself. And it really is what God tells us about ourselves that sets us free, because it helps us to know how to deal with the person we look at in the mirror every day. And so I created Woman at the Well Transition Center around 3 principles: accountability, commitment, and consistency. And when I began to talk to officers, probation officers, pastors, preachers, teachers, everybody about what God had given me, people began to believe. And then they watched my life change. Literally, they watched me go back to school. I received my bachelor's degree, my master's degree, and recently I got an honorary doctorate. And
congratulations.
And I began to pour, thank you. I began to pour my life back into what my passion is, and that is making a difference in the quality of life for other people. And so it doesn't just include the women and girls who've been rescued from human trafficking, but our mission at Woman at the Well Transition Center is to assist formerly incarcerated women and women impacted by the criminal justice system and human trafficking to regain their lives, their families, and their dignity. Our mission caused Woman at the Well Transition Center to be able to serve more than 10,000 women over the past 20 years. We've provided services to more than 6,000 families. I don't want to keep rambling on, but Woman at the Well Transition Center has afforded me the opportunity to do training on human trafficking awareness, on how to recognize and report human trafficking to more than 3,000 aviation and airline employees from Dubai all the way to Iceland and all the way to Malaysia. It has offered me the opportunity to provide human trafficking awareness training to public health officials, law enforcement officers, and the faith community. So I'm really blessed that God has used that piece of information, my own life experience, and turn it into an opportunity to educate the public about exploitation and that it could happen to anyone.
Bishop Donna Hubbard, an incredible, incredible story. A lot of times people don't understand that hope is born in the midst of adversity and conflict, and certainly you had your share of that. And thank you for caring enough to start sharing your story with the rest of the world. I appreciate you so much.
I want to just acknowledge American Airlines for looking at me as a person and not just the record behind me, and for doing that benchmark, doing that one brave thing to hire a survivor of human trafficking to fly the skies and recognize the danger that sometimes presents itself. And I have to acknowledge my Archbishop, who, in spite of the fact that I had this record, my Archbishop Quintard Q.S. Caldwell in Celebration of Praise said, she's not just a preacher and a teacher, but she's a bishop, because I take the gospel and my faith and my hope around the world, believing that if he did it for me, he can do it for others. And I just have to acknowledge that there were those who saw me for who I am and not what I did. And I appreciate that. And I appreciate America's Hope for letting the everyday man know about the extraordinary work that's being done around the world because of people's hope and faith in God. Thank you.
Thank you, Bishop
Thank
Donna
you so much.
Hubbard, for being on America's Hope.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you.
All right, we're back with more in just a moment. And welcome back to America's Hope. I'm Kelly Wright, and we're joined now by Alma Tucker. She is the founder and president of the International Network of Hearts. It's based in San Diego, California, as well as Tijuana, Mexico. It's good of you to join us this hour, Alma, and you're engaged in a campaign to help so many people understand the plight of children. and what they go through. As an investigative officer for the Child Protection Unit with the Mexican Consulate General in San Diego, what have you discovered about the human trafficking of children?
Well, living in this region, Tijuana, San Diego, the most busiest um, cities around the world, thousands and thousands of people crossing every day, legal but also illegal through the mountains, trying to, coming from Latin America, from Mexico to United States, hoping for a better life. But sometimes they face terrible, terrible situations. Then what I notice is the most vulnerable are the children, boys and girls. Then sometimes they cross with family, sometimes other bring them to United States. And that really was then hit my heart in either I promised myself either if I don't work anymore as a consular officer, I found a way to help children that are in these difficult situations in the hands of smugglers and the hands of criminals, then take advantage of them, and they don't have a voice. That's what really hit my heart and create me awareness about I have to do something.
And you are doing something through your organization. And what have you been able to do to help victims of human trafficking and advocate for their rights?
Yeah, thank you. I remember like yesterday, one particular situation, then I received a call from the Border Patrol officer asking for my presence in the emergency room in San Diego for support a little girl, 14 years old girl. Then they brought her through the mountains, and they lied to her. They told her, and the parents didn't pay for bring her through the mountains illegally. Then she has to pay with her body to complete the money for come to United States. I remember like yesterday being in the emergency room and looking for her bed, and didn't took too long to hear a little voice crying for mommy, mommy. And I reached to her and looked at her eyes and told her, I will never let your side until we find your mommy. Was a 24 hours straight supporting her. She has to take the pill after many, many rapes over the night, and report the criminals. And I was there until we were able to locate her mom and dad. Then, like I said, that case really inspired me. Then, since then, and when we opened this organization, that's what our role has been. We provide direct services through our shelters. We have one shelters for boys, another one for girls, and another one for young adults. And in these shelters, we use the best practices around the world to help the survivors. We provide psychological support, sometimes psychiatric for the amount of hurt that they have. We provide legal assistance, housing, and we also look for services for they can continue their life with opportunities and go back to school or whatever they want. But it's been a very difficult job trying to provide for everything for them. But this is our inspiration, and this is what moved our heart to international, our heart to keep going, because we see that the children, what they need is just an opportunity, and we do our best to provide those opportunities for these children.
Yeah, Alma, the story you just described to us, a 14-year-old girl being brought across the mountains, and the men who abducted her continuing to rape her, and then you step in and you were able to provide that help that she needed. You're talking about just one case out of hundreds of other cases. And so with this group home that you created, La Casa del Jardín, it's a group home that you have in Baja, California, and it's designed for the children like this 14-year-old girl and young adults 18 to 24 years old. How difficult is it and how widespread is human trafficking?
Well, before was like in third place of the more profitable crimes around the world, but now it's in the same level of the as the profitable than it is sell a drug. Why? Because one drug you can sell once, but a human being you can sell 12, 15, 20 times a day. Only one human you can imagine how profitable it is. And through pandemia, a lot of the organized crime turned out to look about humans and more with the message than was sent to foreign countries about the border is open, no kids will be behind, and a lot of those smugglers use the children to come to bring people illegal to this country, and they have the message. Then the borders were open. Then we also extend our services to migrants because they brought them to these borders, and then no, the border is not open, but they're stuck in the other side of the United States, and a lot of children were missing and still missing because they were like the ticket to come illegal to this country, and they use them. Then it is big problem, and we have to do something, because once you know this is happening, you cannot just look in the other side. This is children, and we have to give them voice, and it's what we've been doing: give them voice and provide them services.
You have been doing this, as you stated, and you also have a background in psychology. How are you using that to help counsel these victims, these survivors of human trafficking, to get their minds healed and their bodies whole, and then their spirit? How do you lift them up in terms of the whole person?
Very good question. When they arrive at the house, at the shelter, they don't trust us. How can they trust us if usually who is close to them, sometimes mom, dad, somebody that they trust, is usually who take advantage of them. Then takes time for them to trust us, but little by little, we in providing the basic needs. Sometimes they arrive without shoes, without clothes, without the basic needs. Then we start from the basic, but also we provide therapy. Sometimes they need psychiatric attention. We provide education at the shelters. They don't go to a regular school, because if they go to regular schools, they can again engage them and take them. Then they have homeschool, but we provide a different number of activities for also keep them busy and recuperate their self-esteem. We do art therapy, dancing, singing, sports, and every time we can, we also take them to places like pools or the beach. Our shelters are close to the beach. Then I'm very fortunate to have an interdisciplinary team that works with them every day. We have caregivers 24/7, and it is a titanic work. But again, we are so inspired, because when I walk in those shelters and I hear these kids singing or dancing or just in the classroom, that's what my heart say. That's what a child should be doing, being a child, and not like they're being used and abused in human trafficking.
Alma, we're going to take a slight break. When we come back, I'd like to talk to you more about all the great work that you're doing to help children in need, not only coming in from the U.S.-Mexico border, but also right here in the United States. Talking to Alma Tucker. We'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back to America's Hope. So often on this program, we've discussed the scourge of human trafficking. Without a doubt, it is evil. It is wrong. It is sinful, and it's disdainful. Yet it goes on. It's an ugly practice that must be stopped. And for the children who are trapped in it right now, in this vicious cycle of human trafficking and child exploitation, there are heroes who are on the front lines fighting this. She won't classify herself as a hero, but to me she is, and she's a champion of hope. That's Alma Tucker, who's working right there in San Diego and Tijuana, Mexico, trying to help save the children who have been trapped by evil human traffickers. You know, Alma, we were just talking, you spoke about a 14-year-old girl that you helped bring back to hope after she was raped repeatedly by men who abducted her and brought her over the mountains of Mexico. In 2019, you were invited to the White House to talk about human trafficking. You also discussed this issue before members of Congress at the U.S. Capitol on Women's Day in Washington. You have also spoken at the Vatican in Rome, Italy, before the Global Sustainability Network. Does that indicate just how difficult human trafficking has become, that it's become a universally accepted practice and exploiting our children?
Yes, in my experience of 30 years in this subject, we start from not many people were talking about this subject to more organizations and activists is been working. It's not enough. We need more people to join us. And I've been very honored to be talking in important platforms, yes, like the White House, like the Vatican, and that's the way to bring the attention to people that is empowered. Sometimes locally here it's hard because it's Baja California for many years is not in the agenda of the politics. It's not convenient to talk about it. For many years they were talking about attracted sexual tourism, but we as society, we're against that because it's not possible people from other countries or local people think then they can use our children in sexual exploitation, sexual or labor exploitation. Then thanks to these platforms, I've been able to give voice of these children. I know sometimes it's important movies, then people get in like, wow, we didn't knew this is happening. And some people start concerning about it, but it's not enough just to say, is wow, we need to do something. We all need to do something. It's the only way to fight against this horrible crime. This horrible crime not only affect one person, affect the whole family. And I see it direct in our children takes the most value of a child, their infants, their innocence. Then this is why we as an adults, we need to do something. And more educated we are, more understanding about how these criminals work. That's the only way then we can fight against this horrible crime. I just went to an important conference, national conference in the United States, and I hear the testimony of one child saying, then they told her at school, they told her at home not to talk to strangers, but nobody told her not to talk to traffickers. Then it's important about use the right language to our children and explain how they work. Also, I hear in that conference, then they are working stronger in in apps and the social media. And how many times some parents just give the phone to keep busy to our teenagers, to our children, when it's actually a very, very easy way for the criminals to engage with our children. We need more supervision. That's another result of this conference. They were saying the children that are more vulnerable is the one that has less supervision. Then let's go back to basic. Let's supervise our children and let's have better communication to our children.
So important. Look, America, you're watching a very important conversation right here between Alma Tucker and myself about what could be happening to your child if you're not supervising them. This story is a provocative story, but it's a real story. This is something you don't see on the news all the time. We often see on the news the negative results of that, where a child has been lost, hurt, brutalized, and even killed. So tonight we're trying to give you good advice as well and good information so that you are armed with the information to know that there are people after your sons and your daughters. Alma, your advice to everyday Americans on how they can develop situational awareness on how to spot the signs of human trafficking and then do something about it.
Yeah, it's very important to get to know our children, get closer to our children. If we notice situation like or daughter or cousin or niece have more than one phone, for example, that can be a red flag. When they're worried too much at too young age to have a makeup or provocative clothes, also that can be another red flag. And just supervise who they hang with, who are their friends in the social media. Have your computers in an area, then you can, if you walk by, you can see who they're communicating with. Then yes, just more supervision, education, for anybody that we care and love. Everybody's vulnerable. We all are vulnerable. They are looking for organs. They're looking for girls that can bring money through sex trafficking. Then it's just more attention and who we care for, and in general, because when a child is hurt, it's not only a problem of their own parents. It's the whole community should respond and who be aware and who should. If you see something, you have to say something.
And we just have to call it like it is. There are people after our children, and they're doing it right in front of us through social media, just like you've talked about.
Definitely watch for traffickers, watch for who get in contact with our children. But also the statistics says then the major number of people that take advantage of our children is somebody close to the family. I hear horrible testimonies from uncles, grandparents, brothers, boyfriends, and usually it's somebody close to our girls or boys, somebody that knows everything about them. Then it's not only strangers. The enemy can be very, very close. And also, it's important at school. Some traffickers use young students to engage other students at school. At sports, also, it's been reported very, very sad reports about trainers. Then when they take advantage, when they go to national tournaments, when they go out of the supervision of parents, and they take advantage, pastors, I mean, you name it. We just need to watch closer and not trust our children with no one. Unfortunately, so many sick people is around, and we need to be watching for our children.
And it's usually, Alma, as you were telling us, sexual exploitation of our children, the most vulnerable of our society. So given that fact, how do you help children heal from their past and hope for their future when they have gone through this painful experience? How do you help them not only survive but thrive?
In my experience, we already been helping more than 100 children, and when they arrive to our services, they don't trust us. They're afraid. I remember talking to one of our girls after years of services. I asked her one time, how long really took you to trust us? And she said, Alma, almost 2 years. All the time I was concerned when somebody will ask me to do something then I don't want to do. Always I was afraid of somebody coming in the middle of the night, like happened to me before I arrived here. She was sexual exploited for more than 5 years for her own father. Then when they arrived in our shelter, They come with very low self-esteem. They come with thoughts of suicide, bulimia, many post-trauma disorders. Then we implement a program through our interdisciplinary team. We have social workers, we have psychology, and sometimes psychiatric is need. But more than anything, love. We try to make they feel, then, and as it is, we care for them. It is important they testify against who hurt them, because we want that person to be stopped. But more than anything, we care for this girl, for this boy. As we build this relationship, little by little, they start open and sharing with us, but doesn't happen from one day to another. It takes time. But we're there through their process of healing. And after a while, they start talking. They work in therapy. And sometimes they deny they don't want to work in therapy, but we use different techniques like art therapy, like singing, dancing. We use different techniques, and we see how after months of treatment, they go back, they smile again, and they bring their heads up with pride. But when they arrive, they're very ashamed. Then takes time, but it's possible. And thanks for the work of my whole team. We've been seeing how we can share now success stories. We provide a scholarship. Some of our girls already went through university. They working now in a normal field, and they stick with us, and they're like a role models for the little ones, because when they arrive, they don't have confidence in themselves. Many times they say, I'm not going to be good for nothing, because I've been told then the only thing then I'm worth it is to have sex with men, so with women. Then we were very thrilled to support them and to recuperate their self-esteem, and it is possible. It is possible. We just need to give them the opportunity.
Alma, it's really great what you're doing. Thank you for being out there on the front lines in this fight against human trafficking. Appreciate you so much, and thank you for stopping by America's Hope to drop some knowledge, information, and also hope for us to understand that there is hope for the children caught up into this. But you got to get to them, get them out, and get them in programs like yours so that they can have that transformation from a painful past into a promising future. Alma Tucker, thank you. Don't be a stranger. Come by anytime. And keep on advising global leaders as well as leaders in the homes of America to take time out to do the right thing. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
We're back with more in just a moment. My final word next. And welcome back to America's Hope. My final word tonight is, what are we going to do to stop our children from being exploited through the evil practice of human trafficking? Furthermore, it must be noted that today's form of modern-day slavery is far worse than anything that happened during the transatlantic slave trade. Yes, you heard me right. We are trafficking more people into slavery than ever before. Of course, we can document it now. We can actually show examples of what's happening. We can make movies about it. But the bottom line is, what are we going to do about it? Brother to brother, sister to sister, family to family. Yeah, we can call on government to do the right thing. We can call on law enforcement to do the right thing. But when will you and I start doing the right thing to save our children and to give them the future and hope that they deserve? Bottom line is, sometimes hope and freedom, they have to be fought for. Fight for your children, America. Give them the hope that prevails. Good night. Your America and my America.
United we stand. divine.